He knew Mu Qianfan's meeting was scheduled to end at 6 o'clock. Fearing a delay might disturb him, she waited a while before calling. However, when she called, no one answered. Her heart sank. She called again. Still, no one answered. During the meeting, Mu Qianfan had deliberately set his phone to silent. Now that he was unconscious, Wen Jin and Lin Shujia were unaware of incoming calls, so naturally, no one answered. Fortunately, she now had Wen Jin's correct phone number, so she quickly called Wen Jin. As chief assistant, Wen Jin must have also been at the meeting. Unfortunately, Wen Jin's phone was also on silent. He was busy at the hospital and didn't notice any incoming calls, which made Hiyu even more worried. Almost without hesitation, she immediately found Lin Shujia's number and dialed it. Lin Shujia's phone was on vibrate, so he did see her call. However, seeing an unknown number, Lin Shujia hung up immediately. He was busy with some procedures and had no time to answer random calls. Compared to an unanswered call, being hung up on at least indicated the other party saw her call but couldn't answer. So, he switched to sending a message. After the vibration, Lin Shujia took out his phone and saw a name that almost blinded him. Hello, I am Hiyu. Mr. Mu gave me your contact information. Knowing who the unfamiliar number belonged to, Lin Shujia quickly called back. Hello, Mrs. Mu. I'm Mr. Mu's assistant, Lin Shujia. How can I help you? Facing the unfamiliar Lin Shujia, Hiyu showed none of the usual caution and shyness she displayed in front of Mu Qianfan. Instead, she asked with a calm demeanor, Is your meeting over? The young madam's voice is so pleasant, Lin Shujia thought to himself, then replied, Yes, it's over. Hiyu then asked, And Mr. Mu? I just called him, but he didn't answer. Is he still busy? Mr. Mu, Lin Shujia hesitated. Mu Qianfan hadn't instructed him on whether to tell Hiyu about his condition. What happened to him? Hearing Lin Shujia's hesitation, Hiyu immediately became anxious. Has something happened? He wasn't feeling well today. Lin Shujia heard the urgency in Hiyu's voice, clearly worried about the young master's safety, and confessed, Mr. Mu is at the hospital. If this went against the young master's wishes, at most, he'd be scolded afterward, or even sent to Jinghai to assist the eldest young master, and he'd accept that. Is it that serious? So serious he couldn't even answer her call? Hiyu's heart suddenly leaped into her throat. After getting the address, she hurried to the hospital. After finishing the procedures, Lin Shujia went to the ward to find Wen Jin. How's the young master doing? Although Mu Qianfan was unconscious, Wen Jin deliberately lowered his voice. High fever of 39.7 degrees. It came on fast. Lin Shujia's voice was also low. The young madam already knows. I guess she'll be here soon too. Wen Jin frowned, casting a displeased glance at Lin Shujia. How could the young madam know? Can't you keep your mouth shut? Do you really want to go to Jinghai? Lin Shujia weakly explained. The young madam already knew the young master wasn't well. She couldn't reach him, so she called me. The young madam is very worried about him. The young madam has Lin Shujia's contact information? It must have been given by the young master. In that case, Wen Jin had nothing more to say. Some things they couldn't hide. Later, Wen Jin took out his phone for something and found Hiyu's missed calls, making it even harder to say anything. If he had answered that call, he would have told her to, right? During rush hour, traffic was jammed. Hiyu was extremely anxious, wishing she could grow a pair of wings and fly there. She hadn't realized she would worry about Mu Qianfan so much. She cared about this man, who was called her husband, more than she had imagined. Finally, she rushed to the hospital and arrived at the ward door, but she dared not push it open. He only had a cold, so why was she so scared? It was because she had walked through such a door years ago, to see her grandmother for the last time. Since then, a shadow had remained in her heart, making her afraid to push open ward doors. Young Mrs., why are you? Just then, Wen Jin came out to answer a call, and opened the door to see Hiyu standing dumbfounded at the entrance. For a moment he almost used the wrong address. Switching between young madam and Mrs. for the same person was indeed not an easy task. How is he? Hiyu had been reassuring herself on the way that Mu Qianfan was fine, but seeing Wen Jin, she still became nervous. If Mu Qianfan wasn't seriously ill, why would both chief assistants be at the hospital? She couldn't help but overthink the situation. She was genuinely scared. Wen Jin hadn't expected Hiyu to be this worried. Was this still the same woman she had seen at the Clayton Hotel? Back then, she had remained calm and composed even when facing drug drinks. The young madam truly cared about the young master. Wen Jin stepped back to let Hiyu in, comforting her. Don't worry, Mrs. Mu. Mr. Mu just fainted from a high fever. He's already had an antipyretic injection. Hiyu secretly breathed a sigh of relief, then entered and slowly walked towards the bed. This was Lin Shujia's first time truly seeing Hiyu in person, and he couldn't help but stare blankly. When Jean signaled him to leave, but he remained unresponsive. When Jean had no choice but to say aloud, Mrs. Moo, we'll wait outside. Call us if you need anything. Hiyu, who had gradually calmed down, regained her normal expression and nodded, saying, Okay, thank you for your trouble. Wen Jin's words just now were mainly directed at Lin Shujia, but unexpectedly, Lin Shujia still didn't react, his eyes still fixed on Hiyu in a daze. Ajay, come help me. When Jean couldn't stand it anymore, she walked over, grabbed Lin Shujia's hand, dragged him out, and then glared fiercely at him. Only then did Lin Shujia snap back to reality and asked Wen Jean, confused, What are you doing? Why are your eyes so wide? Are you trying to stare me to death? When Jean gritted her teeth. I wanted to ask you what you were doing. What kind of look was that just now? Do you think Jinghai is too close and want to go back to America? Lin Shujia protested softly. How could that be? I don't want to go back. Although the young master can be inhuman sometimes, compared to that one, I'd rather follow the young master. When Jean snorted coldly. Then how dare you look at the young madam like that? What do you think would happen to you if the young master found out? Let me think. Maybe he'd. Lin Shujia quickly interrupted. No, please don't tell the young master. Although the young madam is indeed my type, I absolutely have no improper thoughts, I swear. When Jean looked disgusted. You dare? Don't even bother looking in a mirror. This is the young madam. The young master might dig out your eyeballs if you look at her one extra second. Lin Shujia felt like crying but had no tears. He also regretted it deeply. How could he have stared blankly just now? But he was even more beautiful than in pictures. He truly couldn't control himself. This was the charm of a goddess. When Jean seized the opportunity to threaten Lin Shujia, your weakness is in my hands. You know what to do from now on. Lin Shujia. Indeed, the most venomous heart is a woman's. In the Gaoji VIP ward, he pulled a chair and sat by the bed, gazing blankly at Mu Qianfan with her head lowered. He was truly handsome, the most attractive man she had ever seen, bar none. A man like him must have many women who liked him. This was the first time she had looked at him so intently. Even when he had proposed to her, she hadn't taken him seriously because at that time, she hadn't cared who he was. When did she start to care about him? And that feeling of caring was growing ever stronger. When he wasn't around, she would think of him, miss him, and worry about him. From initially feeling nervous when hearing his voice or seeing his calls, she gradually began to anticipate his calls or messages, wanting to hear his deep yet captivating voice. Hiyu had never liked any man, partly because of her height and partly because of her identity. As an orphan, she carried her own inferiority. Her aloof personality was actually a form of self-protection, believing that if she didn't engage, she wouldn't get hurt, especially emotionally. She feared another loss, just like with her grandmother. But this man had integrated into her life, then into her very being, seemingly determined to reside in her heart. This feeling was terrible, full of anxiety and fear of loss. Yet, it was also wonderful, no longer lonely. Hiyu's mind was a mess, so she got up and went to the window, closing her eyes. When she opened them again, her gaze was clear, for she didn't need to be conflicted. She had made her decision long ago. Why dwell on it so much? It was her overthinking before that had caused Mu Qianfan to fall ill, a mistake she would never repeat. When she returned to the chair, Hiyu held Mu Qianfan's hand. Due to his fever, his hand was a bit warm, but it felt comforting in hers. This was his touch. He had always made her feel warm, a feeling she had once longed for but dared not expect. Being protected in someone's palm, held in their heart, treated with tenderness. He had taken her hand several times, a sensation she would never forget. So, she leaned closer and whispered in his ear. Next time, can I be the one to initiate? As if afraid of disturbing him, she kept her voice very low and spoke slowly. Mr. Mu, please get well soon. I want to be your true Mrs. Mu. She wanted to give herself to him proactively, no longer for compensation or any other reason, but simply because she was willing to be his real wife. She accepted him. As she spoke, she carefully kissed his cheek, then touched his lips. The feverish heat of his touch at that moment felt just like when they kissed. After the kiss, she pursed her lips and smiled softly. She wondered if he had been this cautious when he first stole a kiss from her. Fortunately, he wasn't like her. He didn't suddenly open his eyes and look at her. Mu Qianfan didn't wake up, so he stayed by his bedside all night, not saying a word, just looking down at him. She suddenly felt she could never get enough of looking at him. Her man was too handsome. Later, when Jean and Lin Shujia came to relieve Hiyu, but she gratefully declined. She wanted Mu Qianfan's first sight upon waking to be her and no one else. Given Mu Qianfan's previous attitude, if he saw her by his side the moment he woke up, he would probably be very happy, right? She rarely did things to make him happy, but she would slowly make up for it in the future. Outside the ward, Lin Shujia asked worriedly, "Is it really okay to let young madam be with young master alone?" When Jean shook her head and smiled, "What could be wrong? Given how much young master values young madam, I believe he'll be very pleased." Lin Shujia then asked, "Should we call Uncle Da? After all, he knows best about young master's health." When Jean frowned slightly, "Let's observe the situation first. If young master's old illness hasn't flared up and it's just a common cold, then don't tell Uncle Da, so he doesn't worry." Lin Shujia sighed, "Let's hope young master is alright. Speaking of which, young master's old illness hasn't acted up much in the past 2 years. Could it have gotten better? Should we do a checkup?" When Jean mused, "Let's wait until young master wakes up and ask him. If we act on our own initiative, we'll probably get scolded again. Don't forget, his old illness is a taboo for young master." He guarded him all night. Before dawn, she was unbearably sleepy. Having been exhausted from a day of training, she finally couldn't hold on any longer and fell asleep, leaning against the edge of the bed. This was the closest she could be to Mu Qianfan, so she could notice him immediately if he woke up. She woke up the next morning. Before Mu Qianfan even opened his eyes, he smelled a faint scent of disinfectant. He naturally knew he had been sent to the hospital. But why was his hand being held? Who was so bold as to take the opportunity to grab his hand? Didn't they know he hated such touches? He suddenly opened his eyes, like a waking lion, and glared at the bedside. But when he saw the familiar person, the anger in his eyes immediately turned to tenderness. It was her, his innocent little wife. He had only just fallen asleep. Having stayed up all night, she was sleeping soundly. Mu Qianfan didn't wake her. He quietly withdrew his hand, then got up and carried her onto the bed. Mu Qianfan performed this series of actions very gently, and coupled with He's extreme fatigue and sleepiness, she was ultimately not disturbed, sleeping peacefully. Mu Qianfan leaned down and kissed He's face, smiled as he watched her for a while, then took his phone and went out. The next moment, when Jean, who had just woken up, received a call. "Young master, you're awake. How are you feeling now? I'll come to the hospital right away to see you." When Jean was brushing her teeth, her mouth full of toothpaste foam, making her speech a little indistinct. "Who told young madam? Couldn't you have found an excuse not to go home?" Mu Qianfan was heartbroken. How could he let Hugh sleep like that? He felt tired just looking at her. "Young master, it's like this. Yesterday, young madam called us." When Jean knew that once he was involved, Mu Qianfan would become agitated, so she quickly rinsed her mouth and explained. "She proactively sought you out?" After hearing Wen Jin's explanation, an indescribable feeling welled up in Mu Qianfan's heart. "Yes, young madam was frantic when she couldn't reach you. Young madam was really worried about you. Ah Su and I wanted to stay and keep watch for you, but young madam wouldn't let us." Wen Jin told Mu Qianfan every detail of Hiyu's behavior yesterday, which greatly improved his mood. "You and Ah Su can go straight to the company. There's no need to come to the hospital for now." With 2 light bulbs around, especially Lin Shujia, a 1,000-watt type, how could Mu Qianfan take the opportunity to flirt with his wife? This time, it seemed even heaven was helping him, giving him such a good opportunity. Wen Jin guessed that Mu Qianfan didn't want them to disturb him, but she was still worried, so she asked, "Young master, how are you feeling now? About your old illness?" Mu Qianfan's face suddenly turned cold upon hearing this. He unceremoniously interrupted Wen Jin. "I'm fine. I'm leaving the company matters to you." Lin Shujia, still asleep, was then woken by Wen Jin's call, telling him not to go to the hospital but to go straight to work at the company, so as not to disturb the young master and young madam in their sweet talk. Lin Shujia grumbled groggily. "Xiao Jin, don't you think young master is a case of loving beauty more than the kingdom? Isn't he afraid we'll seize the opportunity to usurp power and ruin his company?" Wen Jin said earnestly, "As for the first question, I suggest you ask young master directly, if you have the guts. As for the second question, think about it yourself after you wake up." With Lin Shujia's meager abilities, wanting to usurp young master's power, he probably wouldn't even know how he died, let alone ruin the company. Damaging even the tip of the iceberg would be giving him too much credit. Such presumptuous talk would only come out when he was joking. She really didn't understand how he could joke anywhere, anytime. He wasn't even out of bed yet, and he was already cracking jokes. Hee. Lin Shujia scratched his head and gave a sheepish smile. "Ask young master? Are you afraid I won't die miserably enough? I didn't realize you were like this, Xiao Jin. I've doted on you for nothing all these years." When Jin's face suddenly flushed. "I've always been this kind of person. Is this the first day you've met me? But it's not too late to recognize reality now. At least you'll know how you died. Did you eat gunpowder for breakfast today? Why are you so fiery?" Lin Shujia couldn't see Wen Jin's expression. He just chuckled and said, "Could it be jealousy? Do you like young master?" When Jean let out two cool laughs. "Do I need to tell young master your reaction after seeing young madam last night? Let's see if I'm the one who likes young master, or if you're the one who likes young madam." All right, I can't win against you. If this goes on, you'll eventually provoke me to death. Just wait to collect my corpse." Lin Shujia had joked enough. "I need to get up. See you at the company." When Jean responded, and was about to hang up, Lin Shujia's voice suddenly came again. "Remember to bring me breakfast. I don't have time to buy it. Make sure you buy my favorite and you're treating." "Why should I?" When Jean was almost provoked to laughter by Lin Shujia, asking her to buy breakfast, not only with no errand fee, but also expecting her to pay, could his cheek possibly get any thicker? Lin Shujia said righteously, "Because you just bullied me. I'm in a bad mood now, and even though you know I can't win against you, you didn't go easy on me." When Jean, how could she forget? Lin Shujia's cheek was so thick, it could completely replace Fan Shiliang in repairing the Great Wall, and Meng Jiangnu wouldn't have had to cry over it. Not long after Mu Qianfan hung up the phone, he returned to the hospital room. Looking down at Hiyu, who was sleeping peacefully, he couldn't help but smile. He hadn't expected her to care about him so much. It seemed he was one step closer to his goal. It was a good thing he hadn't succeeded that night. Otherwise, even if he had gotten her body, he wouldn't have gotten her heart. What he wanted was all of her, including her body and soul. He restrained himself again and again, but in the end, Mu Qianfan couldn't help but gently caress Hiyu's face. 5 years. He had often seen this face in his dreams, and a few months ago, he had successfully married her and brought her home. But only this touch, right now, felt the most real. He had so many things he wanted to say to her, but he was afraid of waking her. In the end, 1,000 words condensed into two. Hiyu? Although Mu Qianfan's high fever had receded, he was still running a low fever. After sleeping all night, his mind was still a bit muddled, so he lay down on the edge of the bed and fell asleep, just as Hiyu had done earlier. His head rested on one hand, while his other hand gently held Hiyu's. This way, even if he fell into a deep sleep, he would know when she woke up. Perhaps it was because she was too tired yesterday, or because Mu Qianfan was by her side, but Hiyu slept very soundly, sleeping until late morning, undisturbed by anyone. It wasn't that the hospital staff were neglectful, it was because Mu Qianfan had given instructions before returning to the room. No one was to disturb the person inside until they woke up. He knew Hugh had stayed up all night watching over him, and he was afraid the medical staff would wake her. He also didn't want to change rooms, wanting only to stay and accompany her here. So when Hugh woke up, she found herself lying in the bed, her hand still being held. She was startled, then immediately saw Mu Qianfan lying next to her. Her mind suddenly went blank. Why had their positions swapped? When had Mu Qianfan woken up? Why hadn't she felt anything at all? How deeply had she been sleeping? Initially, Hiyu's surprise movements were a bit too big, startling Mu Qianfan awake. He groggily opened his eyes, lifted his head, and looked at Hiyu with a hazy gaze. "Why are you sleeping here?" He sat up looking at Mu Qianfan. His face was pale and his spirits were low. One glance was enough to tell he was still sick. Mu Qianfan quickly reacted and sat up straight. "You're awake. The nurse told me you watched over me all night. You must be very tired, right? I'm sorry, I made you worry." Hiyu jumped out of bed as if her, but was on fire. "And no, it's fine. I'm not tired. Your face looks very pale. Go lie down." Though she said she wasn't tired, she couldn't help but yawn. The exhaustion on her face was impossible to hide. By the end, Hiyu herself was embarrassed, her voice trailing off. Mu Qianfan looked at the somewhat flustered Hiyu and said gently, "Then why don't you go home and sleep? Don't train today. You've already done well enough these past few days." "How can that be?" "The competition is coming soon. I can't lose your—" The word face almost slipped out, but Hiyu quickly and awkwardly changed it to, "I can't lose to He Qingwan." Realizing she had almost said the wrong thing, Hiyu's face flushed, and she lowered her head, not daring to look at Mu Qianfan. Even with the awkward change of words, how could Mu Qianfan not understand her original intention? It seemed that her desire to win the competition had a lot to do with him. Although Mu Qianfan's body was weak from illness, making his voice sound a bit lacking in strength, his confidence was strong. He said decisively, "You will definitely not lose to her." He had always known that Mu Qianfan had great confidence in her, even more than her own. But to hear such an unequivocal statement in this situation, she was still stunned. Why did he believe in her so much? Whether it was about her as a person or her abilities, since their marriage, he had almost always unconditionally believed in her and silently protected her. She quietly looked up, meeting Mu Qianfan's gentle gaze. Her face grew even redder, while his, in contrast, grew paler, and his frail appearance made her heart ache. But his gaze was so fervent. Thinking of their interactions over the past few days, she couldn't help but want to escape. Then you rest first. It's so late already. I should go check on the company. Mu Qianfan naturally didn't want to let He leave. What if? I want you to stay and keep me company? Could he refuse this request? Not to mention she truly wanted to stay and keep him company. Even if that weren't the case, looking at his pale face now, she couldn't bear to say no. Almost without any hesitation, Hugh agreed. Okay, I'll go call in sick and pick up some things on the way. You lie down first, I'll be back soon. Hugh left with her phone. She needed to call Yang Yi to ask for leave and also inform Yuluo. Not showing up so late, Yuluo was probably already angry. Seeing her own phone, Hugh realized why she had been able to sleep so soundly until now. Her phone had been silenced, and even the alarm was turned off. So she hadn't heard the alarm and had missed calls from Yang Yi and Yuluo. It went without saying that Mu Qianfan must have adjusted it for her. After all, he had shared a bed with her for so long. How could he not know when her alarm went off every day? He'd silenced it as soon as he carried her to bed. He was afraid the alarm would wake her and prevent her from getting proper rest, but only she could enjoy this kind of tender thoughtfulness. As soon as the call connected, Yang Yi barraged her with questions. How are you feeling? Is it serious? Have you been under too much stress and too tired recently? You need to take better care of yourself in the future. Hugh paused, taken aback by his words, but quickly understood. Someone must have already asked for sick leave for her, and if she wasn't mistaken, it must have been either Wen Jin or Lin Shujia. What she didn't know was that anything concerning her, Mu Qianfan personally assigned to them, and only for her affairs was he willing to be so hands-on. So she replied, following Yang Yi's lead, it's nothing serious, but I'm not up for training today. I'd like to take a day off. Yang Yi didn't suspect a thing, quickly interjecting, okay, then rest well. I'll come see you after I'm done with work. He didn't particularly like interacting with Yuluo, so she seized the opportunity to add, what about teacher Yi? Yang Yi didn't disappoint her. I've already spoken to her. Rest assured. With one phone call, company matters were settled. He quickly left the hospital to buy some daily necessities. She had come straight from the office yesterday and brought nothing with her. By the time he bought her things and returned to the ward, medical staff had already arrived and were examining Mu Qianfan. She naturally went up to inquire about the situation and learned that Mu Qianfan's temperature had risen again, making it very likely he would develop another high fever. She immediately grew anxious, looking at him with a worried expression. Mu Qianfan comforted Hiyu with a hint of contentment. It's fine, don't worry. This is a hospital. They're here for everything. And even if I do get a high fever again, I won't die. Hiyu shot Mu Qianfan an annoyed look. Don't talk nonsense, and don't ever say that word. Realizing her assertive yet ambiguous attitude, Hiyu felt a bit embarrassed again. She quickly left Mu Qianfan aside to ask the medical staff what to pay attention to next. The medical staff knew she was Mu Qianfan's wife and gave her detailed instructions, asking her to take good care of him, ensure he took his medicine on time and in the prescribed amounts, and then comforted her for a few moments, telling her not to worry. They set up in 4 drip for Mu Qianfan, left some medicine, and then the doctor and nurses left, finally leaving Mu Qianfan and Hiyu in peace. Hiyu then went to the bathroom to freshen up. Although her bag contained cosmetics, since she didn't need to go to the office today, she couldn't be bothered to put on makeup, which she never liked anyway. Mu Qianfan also freshened up briefly with Hiyu's help. When they returned to the hospital bed, an awkward silence settled between them. Finally, Mu Qianfan broke the silence. Did you eat breakfast? Hiyu shook her head. I'm not hungry. Mu Qianfan's gaze sharpened. Just because you're not hungry you won't eat? Either you go out and eat now, or I'll have Aunt Lin send it over. You choose. I really don't. He wanted to say she wasn't hungry, but seeing Mu Qianfan's serious expression, she quickly changed her mind. Then I'll go out and eat myself. Mu Qianfan watched Hiyu's retreating back and said faintly, I can accept anyone lying to me, but I especially don't want that person to be you. Hiyu's body stiffened. She hadn't actually planned to eat. She just wanted to go for a walk to placate Mu Qianfan, but unexpectedly, he saw right through her so easily. But it wasn't too late to make amends, so she naturally wasn't foolish enough to admit it. She turned back to Mu Qianfan and asked, what do you want to eat? I'll bring it back for you. Mu Qianfan responded with complete justification. I'll take my medicine. Hiyu. Can medicine be a meal? Essentially. He didn't want to eat, and yet he said it so righteously. After a brief thought, Hiyu turned back as if nothing had happened. Forget it. Let's just have Aunt Lin send it over. She can make something suitable for you to eat. Now it was Mu Qianfan who felt a pang of frustration. I don't want to eat anything right now. Hiyu sat down on the chair by the bed. Neither do I. Mu Qianfan leaned against the headboard, earnestly lecturing. Food is fuel for the body. Skip a meal and you'll go hungry. You cannot eat. He nodded very seriously. That goes for you too. If you eat, I'll eat. If you don't, then I'll starve with you. Perhaps the headache was affecting his thinking. It was only then that Mu Qianfan suddenly realized he had walked right into Hugh's trap. He couldn't help but let out a low growl. He had said all that because he was worried about her health. They say skipping breakfast is bad for the stomach, and he didn't want to hear her tell him one day that she had a stomach ache or felt unwell. But she had dug a pit, step by step forcing him to jump in, only realizing he was almost buried when it was too late. This was something his intelligence absolutely couldn't tolerate. He wasn't frightened by Mu Qianfan's outburst. She said very seriously, however you feel about me, that's how I feel about you. Mu Qianfan, I am your wife. Huh. Hearing Hugh state her identity to him with such a serious attitude for the first time, Mu Qianfan was truly startled. He looked at Hugh with a complex gaze. Hugh took a deep breath, adjusted her emotions, and slowly said, do you remember what I told you last time? As long as I'm conscious, I'll be willing. Mu Qianfan naturally remembered, because all his efforts had been precisely to gain her recognition and acceptance. Hugh was a stubborn person. Once she made a decision, it was difficult to change it. At the same time, she wouldn't regret her decision. She would only work hard to follow it. So she threw caution to the wind. Mr. Mu, I'm ready to be a true Mrs. Mu, but I don't want to be a widow. I don't want to lose my man the way I lost my grandma. Mu Qianfan was filled with mixed emotions. The turn of events seemed to have exceeded his expectations, no longer under his control. He looked at Hiyu in astonishment, calling her name with complex feelings. Hiyu? Hiyu closed her eyes, clenched her fists, and uttered the last sentence. If you've thought it through, then once you're better, we'll go home together. If you haven't, then let's meet at the Civil Affairs Bureau. They had already been to the Civil Affairs Bureau once for their marriage. The next time could only be for divorce. If they couldn't be truly happy together, it would be better to part ways now, lest she fall deeper and deeper into his tender affection, eventually losing herself and becoming unable to extricate herself. Mu Qianfan didn't answer immediately, even though he had long made his choice in his heart. Instead, he stared intently at Hiyu, making her increasingly uncomfortable until she turned her face away to avoid his gaze. Hiyu couldn't stand his gaze anymore and simply turned to leave. You take your time to think. I won't bother you. I'll go out first. Unexpectedly, just as she turned around, Mu Qianfan's weak voice came from behind her. Wife, I don't feel well. Hiyu turned back to Mu Qianfan almost without hesitation, asking with concern, where do you feel unwell? I'll call the doctor to come and examine you right away. As she spoke, she reached out to press the service bell, but her hand was quickly caught by Mu Qianfan. Only then did she realize she had been tricked, yet she wasn't angry in the slightest. Mu Qianfan held Hiyu's hand and said very seriously, I've told you before, my marriage to you is serious. How could I bear to let you become a widow? He looked down at Mu Qianfan, waiting for him to continue. Mu Qianfan didn't disappoint Hiyu, continuing. So for your question, I don't need to make a choice at all, because I made the best choice from the very beginning. Hiyu secretly breathed a sigh of relief. For someone who had already fallen in love, she wasn't without worries. She was afraid Mu Qianfan would give a different answer, or even dislike her because of it. Love is inherently a wonderful feeling that can only be understood implicitly, not expressed in words. Perhaps there wasn't yet so-called love between her and Mu Qianfan, but at least she had hope. Mu Qianfan released Hiyu's hand and gave her his phone. I have a headache. Call Aunt Lin and tell her what you want to eat. As for what I eat, you decide. Hiyu had always considered phones to be very private items, holding too many secrets. Generally, she wouldn't easily give her phone to others, nor would she casually give hers to Mu Qianfan. But Mu Qianfan not only easily gave her his phone but also told her candidly, the password is our wedding anniversary. After the call, remember to set up your fingerprint and save the number. He was naturally quiet, and in such surprising moments, she was even more at a loss for words. She simply opened Mu Qianfan's phone, seeing a large number of apps, many of which she had never seen before. She found Aunt Lin's number in the phone book, then jotted it down on her own phone, and finally dialed it. After that, Mu Qianfan's phone was no longer needed. Watching the phone return to his hand, Mu Qianfan subtly pursed his lips. He couldn't help but feel that the way she returned the phone was a bit like throwing away a hot potato. He called Aunt Lin in front of Mu Qianfan. Although she only spoke a few simple sentences, she neither appeared overbearing nor obsequious. Aunt Lin was Mu Qianfan's subordinate, and he could be considered her current mistress. Even if Hiyu's attitude had been a bit worse, it wouldn't have mattered, but she handled her demeanor perfectly. She wouldn't make people feel she was aloof, but neither would she seem overly approachable. What Mu Qianfan needed was precisely this kind of woman who could manage her identity and attitude well. An overly arrogant attitude would cause resentment, while being too obsequious would demean oneself and even make others think one was easy to bully. This polite yet distant demeanor was just right. So, when he finished the call, she saw a pair of beautiful eyes staring at her. She wondered. They had been together for several months. Hadn't Mu Qianfan seen enough of her yet? If she had asked at that moment, Mu Qianfan would surely have told her that he couldn't get enough, not in a lifetime. He pretended to be calm and sat down on the chair by the bed. Antlin should take a while to get here. You get some sleep first. I'll wake you when she arrives. Mu Qianfen shook his head slightly. I'm not tired. I want to chat with you. Hiyu's mind was rather muddled, and she wasn't in the mood for it at the moment. But I think you should get some sleep now. We can talk about chatting when your complexion looks better. Mu Qianfan smiled, a bit smugly. Is my wife worried about me? Hiyu cleared her throat. Ahem. If you think so, then believe it. Though compared to worrying, I'm more concerned with how handsome the man opposite me is. Mu Qianfan reached out and touched his face, which was supposedly very handsome. Are you saying I'm not handsome? Hiyu's emotions slowly calmed down. If you were acting in a ghost movie, you probably wouldn't need makeup. After all, your current complexion is as pale as a ghost's. Mu Qianfan. How did he not know Hiyu's mouth was so sharp? Had he been facing a fake Hiyu all this time? And was this the real her? Hiyu was now determined not to say anything to Mu Qianfan. She needed quiet time to think about their issues and decide what she should do next. Mu Qianfan saw her standing by the window, staring blankly outside, clearly unwilling to engage with him. So, he said nothing, lest he annoy her too much and cause her to resent him. Furthermore, he was already sick, had taken medicine, and his mind was even more muddled. He genuinely lacked the energy, and before long, he drifted off to sleep. So, when Hugh turned back, she saw Mu Qianfan sleeping peacefully. Only then did she return to the bedside, propping her chin in her hand as she carefully observed the man before her. If she truly had to live with one man for a lifetime, she now hoped that man would be Mu Qianfan. In just a few months, she had already grown accustomed to his presence. Everyone has many facets, and Hugh had another side too. On the surface, she was aloof, sensitive, and difficult to approach, but on the other side, she was gentle, affectionate, and cunning. If she had grown up in a healthy family, she would undoubtedly be a lively, cheerful, playful, and charming girl now. Alas, there are no ifs in this world. Aunt Lin arrived shortly after with meals. Since it was nearing noon, she prepared a nutritious lunch for Hiyu and some porridge for Mu Qianfan. Hiyu set out the lunch on the small table before waking Mu Qianfan. Aunt Lin was sent away by her. Hiyu felt awkward with an outsider present. After sleep, Mu Qianfan regained some energy, but the moment he saw the bowl of vegetable porridge, his face changed. He truly didn't want to eat anything right now. If he had any choice, he wouldn't even want to take medicine. They say all medicine has some toxicity, and he certainly didn't want to consume poison. Besides, all medicine tasted terrible to him. Don't want to eat? He looked at Mu Qianfan indifferently, her calm tone inexplicably conveying a threat.